Behind every amazing flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a behind-the-scenes look at new flavors and the chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders who create them, with your host, Emmanuel.
I am your host, Emmanuel Roche. Thank you very much for listening today. Every other week, I interview chefs, pastry chefs, and bartenders to discover their secrets behind the scenes. I want to know what compelled them to become a chef or a bartender. I want to learn everything about their creative process and discover the unknown ingredients that are finding their way in their drinks and dishes. Today is episode number 9. And as usual, you can find the show notes at flavorsunknown.com. Click on the episode page. Today I have a special guest, and I really feel privileged to have him on the show. His name is Paul Tessier, and he's an award-winning chef. He has been part of the team who received the 3 Michelin star at Per Se in New York. He has as well won the Silver Bocuse in 2015, and he was the coach who brought the American team to victory and won the Bocuse d'Or in 2017. Hi, Chef. We met not too long ago, and I was very impressed by you telling the story about the Bocuse d'Or, and I wanted to have you on the show. So welcome to Flavors Unknown.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk with you.
And again, congratulations, for winning the, I would say, the Silver Bocuse on 2015, and obviously winning with the team, the US team in 2017 as a coach.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty exciting journey.
So for the people who never heard about it, can you please describe what Bocuse d'Or is? And maybe at the same time, who is Mr. Paul Bocuse?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with Paul Bocuse. Paul Bocuse is pretty much considered to be the godfather of modern French cuisine. Really kind of transformed French cuisine from the kind of the classical heavy dishes to that we know now as Nouvelle cuisine. And we might consider his Nouvelle cuisine to be very heavy still, but at the time is total revolution in the cuisine of, 70s, 80s, 90s. He was somebody who was not only, a transformation of French cuisine as one of his legacies, but really became kind of the first celebrity chef as well. He was one of the first chefs to step out of the kitchen, engage with the guests. He was an amazing marketer and really kind of set a standard for chefs to kind of reach beyond, the normal kind of behind the scenes role that they'd always had. And so it really kind of was somebody who galvanized modern chefs in many ways. And the reverence that there is for him and what he did is extraordinary to see. And so one of those things that he was able to do as a result of his, not just his legacy, but who he was as a person, was to start the Bocuse d'Or. And Bocuse d'Or simply means Golden Bocuse. So it was a competition that he had started in 1987 that was really meant to bring chefs together from around the world, bring chefs outside of their kitchens, get them to kind of rub shoulders with one another and create a friendly or maybe not so friendly competition that kind of centered around French cuisine and the classic cuisine of the time. So it's basically a competition that's held every 2 years. It's always in Lyon, France, at a stadium dedicated to Paul Bocuse. Yeah, it's a pretty wild venue, 2,500 screaming fans, 24 countries that have been whittled down from an initial selection of 60. And it's a pretty wild ride. And I think it's pretty amazing to see kind of how it's evolved, over the last 30 years.
Yeah, because it was created around at the end of the 80s, correct? Like 1987, something like that?
Yeah, 1987, and then every 2 years.
Okay, so what does that really means, in the chef's world, that type of competition? I mean, I don't know if the people, realize that maybe they think, oh, that's a competition like another one.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a challenging one a little bit because when we look at this competition from a distance, it's chefs in white toques and white jackets and doing maybe French style cuisine to some degree. And so, a lot of people don't resonate with that, especially in today's world where, casual food is, kind of the craze, right? But I think what the interesting thing for me has been that, when we went to compete in 2015, the best we'd ever done was 6th place. And for years, nobody expected anything of the US. In fact, we're kind of seen as the burger and hot dog country to a lot of people. And so when we came and we took silver, everything changed. The level of respect for the country changed. You went from, us following what other countries were doing to them following what we were doing, and coming back and winning gold in 2017 just kind of cemented the US as a key player in the world of high level cuisine. And this competition is followed, not just by people who are into French food. It's, part of the competition is how well you represent your own country. And so it's really seen as kind of the golden standard of any type of culinary competition. And it also represents, I think, how your country has evolved in its level of cuisine as well.
So how many countries are represented in this competition?
So originally it's kind of like a World Cup structure. It starts with about 60 countries from all the continents. They have kind of national selections where each country selects, a team, which is a chef, and then what they call a commis or apprentice. So they have to be 22 or younger at the time of the final. And so they do a national selection, and then there's a continental selection. So you'll have, in Europe, for example, you'll have 20 countries competing for 11 spots. And so basically these continental selections happen in the Americas, then in Europe. They just had one in Africa for the first time this year, and then in Asia. And so it kind of comes down to a final selection of 24 countries coming from these continents.
Tell me about the moment that, or the day that you realized that you wanted to participate yourself in the Bocuse d'Or competition.
Yeah, it was really at the Bocuse d'Or that I made that decision.
So you went in just watching it?
Yeah, so I went in 2013. I was working at the French Laundry at the time, and I was part of a team that was going over to do a dinner with Chef Keller for what they have. So just to give you an idea of the gravitational pull that Paul Bocuse has, they have a dinner every year as part of the Bocuse d'Or that's called the Dîner de Grand Chef, and it's basically an assembly of a who's who of chefs. And I think there was close to 200 Michelin stars in one room that night. And, it's like us and Alain Ducasse, alternating courses. And so I was there for this dinner initially. And then, we were able to kind of see the team a little bit here and there. And then we went to the final competition, after our event was done. And so 2013, I found myself, in the stadium for the first time, watching a competition that I'd heard about, seen about, kind of seen a few documentaries here and there. But it's kind of like me explaining to you what it's like to be 3 rows back in Madison Square Garden. Nothing really kind of prepares you for
I don't have the thrill of it, for sure. Yes, compared to for you there.
Yeah, when you're sitting there as a chef and you're, watching this display, and you know the intensity that these guys are working under, and to see kind of their level of finesse and execution and the culinary wizardry that is on display there. And then the energy in the stadium. I still have the sound of the UK marching band, kind of resonating in my ears. I think, faces painted, Japanese are beating drums, it's just like, where am I right now? And it's such a dramatic experience. And I think the thing that's missing from what a lot of people don't get from, watching this from a distance or hearing about it is a sense of patriotism that's there. And that adds a layer of emotion and experience that, you don't get from other, cooking competition shows and these types of things. There's anybody can kind of pick their favorite or whatever, but when it's your country, it's a totally different game. And so, being able to kind of see that and feel that and know that we could do better as a country based on, who we are and what restaurants we have in this country, it seemed like, man, we can really do this. And so that's kind of where I really caught the bug. And then, there's a hole in front of the Paul Bocuse restaurant, which is kind of the mecca of cuisine in France, especially, and across the world for many. There's a row of names engraved in the walkway leading into the front entrance. And all of those names are past winners of the Bocuse d'Or, bronze, silver, gold. And so we went and ate there that night. And then, looking at those empty squares kind of, or what would be 2015, 17 was like, wow, this could be us. Why could yes? And so that was where I really kind of caught the bug. And the next 4 years were kind of marked out from that point.
So what were the steps, that you took to get ready for the first competition, the one in 15 when you won silver?
Yeah, it was a real challenge in many ways. I really didn't know kind of what I was getting into in a sense. I knew obviously the clear structure of the competition, but, I'm not a competition chef, generally speaking. And, Richard Rosendale, who had competed in 2013, developed a lot of structure within the organization to establish that. And, that was the biggest kind of learning curve for me was kind of, all right, what does it mean to compete? Like, what skill sets am I missing, if any? And like, how do we organize ourselves? But you're constantly from day one, from day one of training, you're just, the clock starts ticking, and every day just feels like you're falling behind if you're, not meeting the calendar that you set. So, we basically set a calendar, we set clear goals. One of the amazing opportunities I had was to work with Martin Kastner, who's the designer and owner of Crucial Detail, probably best known for his work with Alinea, a lot of the service pieces and experiences they've been able to execute through, the tools and pieces that he's provided for them. So that experience was pretty extraordinary, working with him and kind of going from kind of the possible to achieving the impossible in forms of execution and design.
But I don't think the people realize, I mean, again, I have seen the pictures, of course, when it happened. I'm French, I live in the US, and, I had goosebump, obviously, for you guys, in 17, when I've seen the US winning. You see those pictures of victory and the team on the podium and, all the riot and everything. But I don't think that people realize, like, behind the scene, in order to get ready in 15 or 17, it's to understand like the countless hours of developing, of testing, of preparing, working as a team and working together. I don't think people have an idea of what it takes.
Yeah, zero idea. I mean, I think a lot of people are used to seeing cooking shows like you see on television where it's, a quick challenge. You have 3 hours, you do this and you go boom, 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 you're done. And, that shows how much skill you have built into who you are, right? And the Bocuse story is a totally, totally different journey. You look at what Olympic athletes do to prepare for their events, and you kind of know behind the scenes, these guys that just train incredibly hard for this. But, you watch them run a race and you're like, cool, they did it, And so behind the scenes for us is it's just a total human story of dedication and commitment. I mean, you're talking about over 3,000 hours in a year of multiple team members' time and design time and everything else that goes into us. And so, in the beginning, you're putting in 10, 12-hour days, it starts to ramp up, and then you're working 6, 7 days a week, 14, 16 hours a day to, you only have one chance at this, right? And you don't want to show up that day thinking, oh, I could have done more. Every time we go into this, it's giving everything you have and putting, every effort into it that you possibly can to differentiate yourself from the other competitors, because they're doing the same. It's amazing the funding and support of, the other governments and in other countries. I mean, the Crown Prince of Norway or Sweden, show up to their tastings, and, it's just a whole level of getting that they have there.
Is it the Olympics, for a culinary world?
Most certainly. Yeah. What I say is it's the World Cup, because the selection process, everything is very, very similar. And, it's really the World Cup of the culinary world.
So can you describe what you cooked and, in front of those people and what it's like, cooking? You said it's a stadium with 2,500 people chanting, and, it's completely different than being, in even in some of the prestigious kitchen that you worked before. I want to understand what you did, and then at the same time, what was the feeling about it?
Yeah, sure. So, the way that the competition is structured is, every candidate is assigned a theme and an ingredient, right? And so for us, it was guinea hen was our meat that we were basically assigned, and that came in September, end of September. We were given this information, and so at that point, you're scrambling, working hard to kind of define what we're going to do, with the bird. And then towards the end of November is the plated dish. So, it's basically 5.5 hours, the two of you in the box, 4 burners in an oven, a sink and some tables. That's all you get. You have to bring everything else that you want in there. And so you're working from that moment that protein's released to define what it is you're going to do. End of November, the fish was assigned to us. And so you have to design everything out where you're being creative, but then you're also training to execute these dishes. And so to give people a sense of how much detail you're going into and how much you're taking on in this short amount of time, I think we had 140 ingredients with 40 recipes executed by two chefs, one of them being 22 or younger, in a matter of 5.5 hours for, a total of 28 plates. It's pretty daunting thinking about that task. And so essentially what we do is, we basically define what technique and approach we're going to take, what the presentation is going to be. We lock in those things. And that takes months, even up to the final day, things are changing. And then we put these into what we call timed runs, and so you're essentially dividing the tasks, separating them out, and then pushing through it. And it's a huge challenge to consolidate all of that effort in there. And Martin was amazing to kind of create tools and things for us that could not only create efficiency and save time, but also increase precision. And so, when we get to the final rounds of training in the last 2 months, we pump techno music into the kitchen at full volume to kind of emulate that.
Wow.
You literally can't hear each other in the kitchen. You can't hear your timers when they're going off. And so, by preparing in every possible way for, to create it, make it more difficult than it will be that day was kind of the goal. And then, being in the box that day, it's interesting. Like I thought I didn't know, like Skylar and I had never competed prior to that day. And, we're going head to head with competitors from Norway and Sweden and other countries that had, done this for literally a decade. Multiple competitions with, their national selections, other competitions outside of Bocuse d'Or. And then both, the two gentlemen who were on the podium with myself were both repeat, Bocuse d'Or candidates for their countries. So, here we are, like never having competed together in anything before. And day one is Bocuse d'Or final, and so that was a huge daunting unknown, but we were really surprised by the fact that we were just confident in our preparation, and we were just excited. We were just excited to be there, show the world, what we've been working on in the corner, for the last, 12, 14 months. And so I would say our training prepared us for that day in an amazing way. And we were just at full speed, and you kind of block out everything around you. Like you don't look up, you block out the noise. It's interesting that you hear every conversation around you, but you not only have this crowd around you, but you have kitchen judges watching your every move, making marks on how well you're working, your waste, your cleanliness, your organization, your communication, all the other chefs and coaches, that are crowding around your box, the cameras that are in your face. So it's a pretty incredibly intense environment, but it's super fun.
So this is when you won silver, correct?
Right.
Okay. So who won the gold that year in 15?
So Orhan Johannesson from Norway won gold. We've become really good friends since then. But, that day it was interesting because, we had never done better than sixth in, 28 years. And when we won silver, it was amazing. It was like, this was unachievable for so many years that we had won silver. And so we finally got the scores and looked at it. Like we were 9 points away from gold out of 2000. So, you think about that, you're like, wow, we not only got silver, we almost won this whole thing. This is incredible, and then 2 months later, I was like, man, we almost won. We should have won. Like, how do you, and it was honestly there's a lot of factors in how things are decided.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but at that time, you already worked with Martin Kastner in 15?
Yeah, that was the first year we worked together. So that was a really interesting process of kind of coming together, like really not knowing each other and how we both work. Probably it was a good 3 to 4 months of discovery of who we are and what our techniques and mentality are. And then that was where things really began to get exciting because I began to realize, what his skill sets were, and he understood kind of how I worked in our communication. And so between the two of us together, we were really able to kind of create a whole level of communication and execution together that allowed us to kind of stop asking, can you do this? But, really reach out beyond the normal ask and achieve things that we didn't think either one of us were possible from the beginning.
And for the people who are listening, can you mention like the value that he has added, in that competition in 15? Because it's nothing to do directly with the cooking aspect, correct? This is really the technology in the kitchen.
Yeah, sure. So when you think about it, for us, we start, I'll use the guinea hen that we did for an example. And so, at the French Laundry, we would get birds in, we'll, kind of remove the skin from the top, leaving it sort of intact at the base. And then, maybe we put a mousse or a sausage or something, sliced truffle, whatever we might want to do. And then we pull that skin back over, we let it cure and set. And then, we'll cook that bird. And so when you cut that breast off, you get a nice layer of this kind of mousse underneath the skin, and it's really beautiful, right? And so that's great in a restaurant setting, but, for the Bocuse d'Or, you have to have, 14 exact portions, and, chicken breast isn't exactly same from end to end. So, my challenge was like, how can I kind of get this layer and definition and, I need to do it in a way that's even beyond the normal restaurant, because here is, this is the pinnacle of possibility, right? And so by working together, we were able to create a wooden frame that acted as kind of a carcass in its form. And so we were able to layer in the breast and layers of sausage and truffle and mousse in there and wrap that in the skin and make it look like a whole bird. But when we were done, we were able to get, 6 perfect portions out of each one. And so that was something where we took all of the natural technique and ability and recipes, et cetera, that we had coming from the professional kitchen. But by pairing that with the design element and the functionality of his repertoire of ability to create tools, et cetera, we were able to make something that previously wouldn't have been possible without that collaboration together.
And it went beyond this. It went, I think that there was the whole aspect as well of serving, the dish.
Martin was hired on to kind of design the platter, right? So for the meat dish, you basically have to create a platter that's supposed to be, breathtakingly beautiful and like essentially a frame for the food you've created. And so you see a lot of silver and gold things and elements. And every year it's the big anticipation is what's the next winning platter going to look like? What's the new thing that somebody's going to do? And so that was what Martin was originally hired to do. And we kind of got basically sidetracked by all the tools and realized that was really the important thing, because the difference maker for us is that Martin looks at the food and its elements and then designs the platter in response to that. Where a lot of other countries, it's kind of like, okay, we're building a platter. This is like the design, cool idea. And then we'll put the food on, And so when you think about it this way, it's kind of like, okay, first we looked at the painting and then we decided where this is going to go in the room. And then we decided what frame we're going to build for it. And so the frame, the platter we built was this really kind of magical round platter with a massive hole in the center that we suspended our little corn nest that we had done. And then the guinea hens were kind of suspended over the top of that. And so it looked almost like, I think somebody said it was like a magic trick, like how does this all work? And the focus was still on the food. Like that was my main thing. Like, okay, the guinea hen was our assigned protein. That needs to be the focal point and it needs to look like a beautiful whole roasted bird. That was what we had kind of set out to do. And so Martin's, kind of genius in the world of design and, understanding food as well as he does, really played an integral part in that presentation.
And how the plating and, the whole technology aspect contributes into like the scoring, for the Bocuse d'Or.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, I always liken it to kind of like a movie, right? Like you have the first opportunity you have as an impression is when the platter walks by. It first comes out of the kitchen and the judges see that. That's kind of the first impression you get where, it's kind of the trailer to the movie, right? Like, oh, looks amazing. I think I really want to go watch this. And then when they get to taste the dish and the flavor and profile of it, that's kind of the full enjoyment and taking in of that storyline. And so, there's kind of these elements where you have different parts of the presentation that the main scoring is for taste, right? 40%. Goes to taste and temperature, et cetera, all the things that apply to that. And then 20% is presentation, 20% is how well you represent your country. And then 20% is your kitchen score. And so, while the presentation score is lower than taste, you need that, what I call the X factor or wow moment of that platter coming out, that food coming out and the presentation of it.
After winning the silver in 15, so why did you decide to coach the US team in 17?
It was really about, going to finish what we started. Finished in 2015. We were on this amazing high. We were on this kind of like, wow, we can't believe we did this. And then it came down to, 2 months later, as I mentioned, where it was like, wow, we were so close to gold. Like it went from kind of an excitement to kind of a disappointment. Like we could have finished the job here and now we got to go back and do it. And so it was a really matter for me of deciding, whether I was going to compete or coach. But either way, I knew, we have to go back and finish this. And so everything was geared towards that over the next 2 years of rebuilding the next team, building a kitchen for them, giving them everything they possibly could need to go back and do this. And so that's really what we pursued over the next 2 years. So yes, it was going back to finish what we started.
So what's the challenge for 2019? Because January, correct? End of January, this is the new competition in the Bocuse d'Or, correct, in Lyon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the challenge for 2019 is to maintain our standard, to maintain the level that we compete at. You can't control the outcome, right? And so whether it's bronze, silver, gold, where you end up there, obviously we want to be on that podium as a minimum, but we want to win. That's what we do. And so, we compete against ourselves in the sense that we know the standard we hold ourselves to, and you can't control what other people are doing. So, the field's different every year. That's the ultimate thing. It's a competition, and you're not competing against everybody. You're competing against the 24, guys or girls that are in the kitchens those days. And so, our challenge for us is to maintain, who we are as the US and continue to deliver expectations.
And are you part of the coach as well this year?
Not having an official role with the team. I'm looking at opening my own restaurant, hopefully in the future here. And so trying to dedicate more time to that, because it's a pretty consuming process of being the coach and everything. So a lot of the work I did for the team, I tried to begin in 2016, actually. My two assistant coaches are now the coach and candidate for the US. And the young lady who won the commis competition we put on in a kind of an effort to search for a commis for the next year is now the commis for this year. So they were all alongside the process previously. So that really helps with a lot of the continuity and the experience and knowing what we went through and a lot of those key elements. So, my role now is, I talk to Matt, who's our candidate now, on pretty much a weekly basis, and kind of confirming his decisions and interpretation of the rules and, the new tasks that they have in front of them. And then, being in the kitchen with them at least, twice a month, if not more, to kind of just be alongside the process. And that will ramp up probably in these final months to kind of, once they start getting the training runs and giving them feedback and, critiquing what they're doing. So, they're right here in my backyard. So it's great to be able to kind of support them in the process.
And between being a candidate in 19 and coaching the team in 17, which one was the most challenging?
Coaching was a totally different experience. When you're the candidate, you're bearing all the pressure and the weight of everything, but you also are in control in a sense of what you can and can't do and where you're at in the process. As a coach, you are working to do everything you can to give the support and direction that the team needs. And so you're constantly battling what the right approach is for the moment you're in. And so for me, it was a lot more stressful in a lot of ways being the coach, because, certain things you're kind of dependent on the guys who are the team, and you're not always 100% sure where they're at, mentally, physically, in their state of mind, in preparation for everything. And so, I think we had a strong sense of confidence in their skill, background and abilities. But there was always some open-ended things even to the final day. I mean, my book about the whole story kind of tells, some of the challenges that happened even in the box on the final day. And, those things were just incredibly stressful to kind of work through, find the answers, find the way through. And so there was definitely a different level of experience. I think I prefer competing over coaching.
Okay. And how did you inspire the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt Peters and we worked together, at the French Laundry, and he was our candidate in 2017. So I think the inspiration really happened early on. Even when I was training, he was a part of a few of our tastings, and, that way he was kind of exposed to the process a little bit. And then when we won silver, I think that inspired a lot of confidence in our, future team and who was going to be next. And so that was kind of our first conversation was, on the heels of us, winning silver, was his interest in competing. And so I think the inspiration really, really began there as just the simple decision to, prioritize this in his career. And so, from there, it was really, honestly, you're really just trying to support kind of the ideas that they come with. I mean, you want this ultimately to be their food that day that they feel excited about, they're confident about. And so, my goal is to kind of, create a vibrant culture of collaboration and idea sharing. And then, really to kind of, once we start locking into some specific ideas, to really encourage that process along and add feedback and advice, and working with Martin and him together to kind of define the direction as early on as possible. The sooner we make decisions, the sooner we can get solutions, the more time we have in the end to create, to kind of define, the actual runs and the timing and all of that.
And everyone can obviously read all the details about this, and I guess 17 and 15, in your book, Chasing Bocuse. So what is the book about beside the competition? I'm sure there's other elements.
Yeah, the book is an interesting story. So, after 2015, it was kind of this idea hey, maybe we should write a book about this, whole silver story and the journey. And it's a super rich story about people and about that kind of human experience of competing. And so that was the goal. We set out to write kind of that story for 2015. We actually sold the book originally to the publisher as a silver story. And then we started to realize, we really should include the most recent story, whether we win or not. And of course, in my mind, it's like there's only one outcome to this story that makes sense for us. I guess about 5 months before we went to compete in 2017, I started writing the story, continuation of that story of us winning gold. So, told the guys, don't mess this up, we, we don't want to go back and rewrite this. So, it's really a story about the human effort behind it and the collaboration. Mentor is our organization, the foundation that sponsors the team and creates the opportunity for us. And so all of the coaches and everyone else who was involved alongside the 2015 and 17 stories are included in the book. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's Thomas Keller, Jerome Bocuse, Gavin Kaysen, Daniel Balloud, and a long list of others, Grant Achatz, that are included in this story. And so it's pretty exciting when you look at this kind of idea of bringing all these amazing chefs together for a singular effort together as a country. It's a compelling story that, I'm excited is finally being told.
So that's what has changed in your life since the Bocuse d'Or?
A lot of things have changed in the sense of, before the Bocuse d'Or, I was, working for Thomas Keller, and, that was for over a decade. And so, you're in the kitchen, you love what you do, you're, excited for what you've learned, and you obviously have a kind of a status in a way of working for him. But, when I did the Bocuse d'Or, it really kind of just opened my eyes to a whole different world. You're exposed to all these different chefs, different perspectives, different attitudes in the kitchen. And so, it was kind of a real eye opener in that regard. And then, after winning silver, really kind of just opened a lot of doors of meeting other chefs through Mentor and the foundation. And then, it doesn't hurt, having that on your resume that you open that path through. And so, it's created a lot of conversation with a lot of different people, I don't think I would have met otherwise. And so it's pretty exciting. And I think one of the things that I love the most about it is just all the friends that I've made in the chef kind of community across the world, friends in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Japan, South America, everywhere, and so that's been really exciting. And the book's been great because, we went from nobody really caring that we were there in 2015 as kind of like a high five, thanks for coming, to, now we have a book about how to win the Bocuse d'Or, basically. And, when we go to events now around the Bocuse d'Or, there's a huge level of respect for who we are as a country and what we've achieved. So that's the biggest takeaway and satisfaction from this whole thing.
So, and you are the director of the culinary and media at Heston Culinary. So can you tell us what is Heston Culinary and what's your role there?
Yeah, so this is like a totally different world that I found myself in. I kind of originally stepped into, this project that was going to be, I thought, a 6-month consulting role while I was kind of working on a restaurant post Bocuse d'Or in 2015. And, what got me into this project with Heston, which is, a company based here in Napa Valley, is the idea that we can, teach people how to cook in the home. When we think about our kind of culinary landscape as a country, it's evolved and changed dramatically over the last 30 years in such an extraordinary way. But kind of underlying that is this thing that's not talked about much, which is the fact that a lot of people just aren't cooking anymore. They don't know how to cook. They didn't grow up cooking, both parents working and, this kind of thing. And so you have this kind of group of, or our culture in our country where like people are essentially, they're on Instagram, they're on, all of the food networks, they're, they have Whole Foods across the whole country. So there's access to ingredients and information and all of this. And yet people can't execute that for themselves. And so I kind of got involved in this project where it was like, how can we connect, what we know in the whole world of technology with cooking, and cooking is specifically on the stove was our starting point. And so essentially we built this smart cooking system, which imagine that you can take your oven dial, where you set an exact temperature, and you can now do that on your stove. You can now set your stove to 300 degrees. And then it's kind of a question of like, well, what do I cook at 300 degrees? And kind of understanding how we can take that level of control on the stove, connect that to an app. And we have step-by-step guided video recipes for the consumer, throughout that. So it's a pretty fascinating project. We're launching, internationally this year with this. It's being built in not only into our sister company with Heston Residential, but with GE as well. And so I've been driving kind of the whole, kind of concept decision making of, from a culinary perspective, what the right thing is to build, and then kind of doing all of the recipe development, testing, media development, and then, now working more on kind of business partnerships, et cetera. So that's what I do by day. And then by night it's Bocuse store and working on future restaurant plans.
So then you are a believer of course, science and technology in the kitchen. So how much science influence your creative process?
I would say the creative process is the starting point. And my general philosophy is like, let's build what we want to build and do what we want to do, both for Bocuse store and in this project. And then science comes along to really make that possible. So we have a team of culinary scientists that work, full time on enabling the technology to give the level of results that we want. So for example, like you take a steak and you want to cook it perfectly medium rare, super impossible to do in a pan, right? And so what we do is we measure that. We have you measure that steak. You tell us whether you tempered it or not. And then in the background, you tell us, or in the app, you tell us how you want it cooked. And then behind the scenes, we've created algorithms for every possible scenario. So we now have a recipe that's made specifically for that steak you just selected. And so now you're cooking in a pan in about 12 minutes, a perfectly medium rare steak. So these are kind of things that science does in the background where there's like just a massive amount of testing and validation, algorithm building, PID tuning, like all different kinds of things that we do to make all of this possible. And, now we're moving from kind of a countertop burner into built-ins across the world, localization of content, everything else that we need to do. So the culinary science team is exceptionally important to what we build, and they're quite busy.
So the start point of the inspiration is still the produce, correct? That's the produce that start like the innovation process for you, and then the technology is the way how to deliver it the way you want.
Like what we look at as our level of success is what we deliver on the plate, right? What is the consumer actually enjoying and cooking in their own home, and how good was that final product? There's a lot of technology out there that's really exciting, but it actually really doesn't deliver anything better. There's kind of this play out there for a lot of companies where like, hey, let's build something really cool. Let's throw some key technology in it, and then, we'll market it. But ultimately, we just want to get acquired and make some money, right? We're not in that game. We're in this game to really help people cook better food and partner with people who are going to help us give them better access to ingredients and connect that to the cooking experience and give them all the information. So you're not on YouTube, on some recipe site and somewhere else. Like everything's right there in front of you. And you're literally learning how to cook by putting food on the table, as opposed to trying to download a bunch of information and then try to execute on your own.
So I want to come back a little bit in your previous life, because you mentioned obviously Thomas Keller, but you started, and I mean, you work with a lot of prestigious chefs. It was, of course, speaking to my DNA that you spent some time in Le Moulin Mougin with Roger Verger. I used to live, in fact, few miles, from there, and I've been to the Moulin Mougin. And then as well with Eric Ripert, Le Bernardin, and then Thomas Keller, Per se, Bouchon, and obviously the French Laundry. So you work with a lot of those iconic individuals. What did you learn from them, and how it helps shape, you as the professional and the chef you are today?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you learn something different from everyone, and when I was in France, the two places I worked there, I just was absorbing the culture, the language, and the cuisine all at the same time. And I think that gave me, kind of just deepened my love and appreciation for French food and the French culture surrounding food. And, when I was at Verger's, the reason I went there is I wanted to see what this classical cuisine was from one of the pioneers of it. And it was a really amazing experience to be there for that time. He was still there at the time. And so, took away kind of, from that whole 6-month experience, what the French culture and mindset was behind the food. I think you can follow a recipe and you can cook something, but if you don't understand sort of the culture behind the food, like you're missing a big part of it. And so coming to New York, it was a huge eye opener of New York City and cooking at the highest level. And with Chef Ripert, it was all about the fish and the quality and the way it was treated. And then the sauces in that kitchen are amazing. And just what goes into that and the history behind a lot of the core sauces there. And that was kind of the prized position in the kitchen was to be the saucier, and it was a 6-month minimum commitment once you got there. And, you're sitting there making 25 sauces every night for all of the stations, and the chef comes by and he's tasting them all before service, and you're kind of crossing your fingers you got it right. And so, that was the key thing, was just kind of looking at the level of attention and detail paid to that. And then, I was part of the opening team at Per Se, and that was my introduction to Thomas Keller, which was just blew my mind. Just the level of intensity and the team that was assembled, not only to be the team in the kitchen, but the whole French Laundry team that was there to train us for that launch of that restaurant, which was pretty extraordinary. So, the amount of knowledge in that kitchen was really exceptional.
And you went there when they got the 3 stars Michelin?
Yeah, so I was part of the opening team in 2004. And so we got 4 stars New York Times about 6-7 months later. And then about a year and a half later, the Michelin Guide came to New York. And I was a sous chef at the time when we got 3 Michelin stars. And prior to the Bocuse d'Or, that was pretty much the exceptional moment in my career where, you're there as part of the team that made this possible for the first American chef to get 3 Michelin stars. And so that was a pretty exceptional moment for us and our team, and the takeaway from working for Chef Keller's, in so many layers, but ultimately, it's the level of detail you pay to everything, quality of ingredient, where it comes from, how it's treated, how clean is your garbage room? If your garbage room is clean, well, chances are you're paying that same level of detail to the rest of your work. And so, we have a quote that's like, treat it like it's yours, one day it will be, having that sense of ownership and commitment, to what you're doing. So, from each of these chefs, you kind of take away different things that kind of shape who you are in your own style of cuisine as well.
So can you talk to us a little bit about your new project? You're saying that you are working on opening a restaurant. So I guess it is in the San Francisco area in Napa Valley?
Yeah, so we have the huge challenge of location out here in Napa. So I'm looking at somewhere in the Napa Valley. We've had a few locations that we kind of got close with, but, ultimately didn't work out. And so there's a few locations, that we're looking at here. Hope is to kind of lock something in the next, 6 months here, if not sooner, and then focus on an opening in early 2020 if possible. So, a few different ideas of, what kind of food it would be, but most likely, kind of a modern American cuisine and, something kind of in the fine dining realm, but location kind of determines a lot of things. So yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Well, good luck for your new adventure then.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, Chef, it is time for the rapid fire questions. So where do you go when you want to culinary travel?
Where I'd want to go next would be Asia. Somehow I've never made it to Asia. So going to Japan, traveling through there, seeing all the things you've heard about would be next. That would be the first thing on my list.
Who is the chef that you most admire today?
I think the chef I most admire today, as far as, the relevance, that they're having is, I would say, in some ways, well, I guess you got to narrow it down to a chef. I think what Thomas Keller has done obviously has been, amazing. It's kind of the obvious answer on my part. I think what Grant Achatz has done as well has been, really impressive, and seeing him kind of really expand beyond the borders of Chicago. So I'm really interested to see kind of where he goes next.
What is or what was your most memorable food moment outside of, I'm not talking about being a chef, but I'm talking about tasting something?
There's so many. I think honestly, like one of the most memorable moments, if I just think about food, is I was actually in Paris, and we were there after Bocuse d'Or, just my wife and I, and we were going to go to this bistro called Chez Michel. And I just remember like walking up to the door and just the aroma that was coming through the front door of just truffles and roasted meat, and everything was just so like, it just drew you in, right? It was cold outside, it was a little drizzly, and you're just like, I'm in the right place. and just, that moment, and of course the meal delivered that, but it was kind of just that ambience you can't create outside of great cuisine.
So what are your favorite restaurants or bars in the San Francisco area?
Yeah, there's a long list.
I know.
From a 3-star Michelin level, Benu is amazing. I used to work with Corey, and it's been amazing to see him really come into his own and his own style of cuisine. We went to Mr. Jou's, Brandon Jou's location there in San Francisco, and just seeing what he's done in the middle of Chinatown is pretty awesome. I would say those are two of the top ones there. Mexican food, Nopalitos, amazing down there. They do a really amazing job.
Can you give me 3 dishes that you could not live without cooking or eating?
That's a tough one. I would say probably, just the classic roast chicken with whatever side you're doing, depending on what time of year it is, would probably be top of the list. My favorite thing in the kitchen is fish. So can't say I could pick a specific type of dish, but, pretty much anything based around fish and seafood would probably be somewhere in there. I think beyond that, probably just a good taco.
No. What is your favorite one?
It's got some good spicy carne asada. Probably be where I'd live there.
Okay, so thank you very much, Chef, for your time today. That was really very exciting. It was an unbelievable moment for me to watch the U.S. team winning in 17 the Bocuse d'Or, and I wish obviously all the best for the team for 2019.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for listening today. No worries if you were not able to write down some information that our guest was talking about, because you can find all of those in the episode show note on flavorsunknown.com. If you have suggestions about who would be great to have as a guest on the show, please answer the question in the comment section of the contact page on the website flavorsunknown.com. I will do my best to contact them and try to see if I can get them on the show. I see you in 2 weeks. And until then, remember that people who love to eat are always the best people.
Thanks for listening to Flavors Unknown. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review. Find the show notes at flavorsunknown.com. And if you want to join the Flavors Unknown community, search Flavors Unknown on Instagram and Twitter.